Zimbabwe has officially begun compensating white farmers who lost their land during the land reform program of the early 2000s. Finance Minister Mnangagwa announced that the government has approved the disbursement of $3.1 million, marking the first payment under the 2020 Global Compensation Deed. This initial payout benefits 378 farmers, out of 740 farms approved for compensation. However, the total compensation claim is $311 million, and farmers will receive only 1% in cash, with the remainder settled through long-term treasury bonds. The government hopes this move will improve relations with Western nations, which imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe following the land seizures. However, some farmers and advocacy groups argue that the compensation is too little and too slow, with many farmers struggling financially. Hello to you all. As always, I would like to thank all the subscribers to the channel. I have always said, without you, I would not be in this space. Thank you so much. Please, if you are watching this and have not yet subscribed, please I ask you to go ahead and subscribe. It is free, and you will be supporting the channel. Thank you. Let us carry on. Zimbabwe has begun compensating white farmers who lost their land in the early 2000s, issuing an initial payment of $3 million. The farms were seized under a controversial land reform program between 2000 and 2001. This marks the first installment of the $3.5 billion compensation deal agreed upon in 2020 between the government and the farmers. In 2000, then-President Robert Mugabe launched a radical land reform initiative, aiming to correct historical injustices. Thousands of white farmers were displaced, and their land was redistributed to Black Zimbabweans. While the policy intended to address inequality, it was often carried out violently and led to long-term economic and political consequences. Indeed, Zimbabwe committed to paying $3.5 billion in compensation to white farmers who lost their land during the country's land reform program in the early 2000s. This agreement was signed in 2020 under the Global Compensation Deed, but the payments have been slow and controversial. Recently, the government made its first compensation payments, disbursing $3.1 million to a group of 378 farmers. However, many farmers have rejected the deal, arguing that the compensation is too low and that most of the payments are being issued as long-term government bonds rather than cash. Some farmers are struggling financially and have accepted the payments out of desperation. The land reforms, originally led by former President Robert Mugabe, aimed to redistribute land to Black Zimbabweans but resulted in economic turmoil and international sanctions. The current government under President Emmerson Mnangagwa is trying to resolve the issue as part of efforts to rebuild Zimbabwe's economy and improve relations with international creditors. President Mugabe's land reform policies were deeply rooted in addressing colonial-era inequalities. In 1998, he aimed to reclaim one-third of Zimbabwe's productive farmland from white farmers, redistributing it to black peasants. At the time, 4,500 wealthy white farmers owned 50% of the country's land, a stark imbalance stemming from colonial rule. Initially, Mugabe's anti-racism stance earned him favor, as he allowed white farmers to remain after independence in 1980. However, by the late 1990s, land reform became a contentious issue. Critics accused Mugabe of using land redistribution to deflect attention from government corruption, while supporters viewed it as a necessary correction of historical injustices. The reforms, often carried out aggressively, led to accusations of state-sanctioned theft from white farmers. The government countered by arguing that colonialists had similarly seized land from Black Zimbabweans. These policies had profound economic and social consequences, shaping Zimbabwe's trajectory for decades. Mugabe's land reform program had far-reaching consequences for Zimbabwe's economy and society. While it was intended to correct colonial-era injustices, its chaotic implementation led to severe economic decline, political instability, and social unrest. For instance, Zimbabwe was once a major agricultural exporter, particularly in tobacco and maize. However, after white-owned farms were seized, production plummeted, leading to food shortages and a reliance on imports. The economic downturn contributed to hyperinflation, which peaked in 2008 when Zimbabwe's currency became virtually worthless. Many displaced white farmers left the country, while newly resettled black farmers lacked resources and expertise, leading to high unemployment and widespread poverty. The land seizures were often violent, with white farmers and their workers facing assaults and intimidation from militant groups loyal to Mugabe. Mugabe used land reform to strengthen his grip on power, distributing land primarily to his political allies rather than ordinary citizens. Western nations practically imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe, further worsening the economy and limiting foreign investment. In recent years, Zimbabwe has attempted to compensate displaced white farmers, but payments have been slow and controversial. The country is still working to revive its agricultural sector, but challenges remain due to land ownership disputes and economic instability. So, Zimbabwe is working to recover from the economic and social challenges caused by its land reform policies through several strategies. The government has begun compensating white farmers who lost their land, with an initial payout of $3.1 million. However, many farmers argue that the payments are too low and slow, with most of the compensation being issued as long-term government bonds. Efforts are underway to boost agricultural productivity, including supporting new black farmers with training and resources, encouraging commercial farming to restore Zimbabwe's status as a major food producer, investing in irrigation and infrastructure to improve yields. Zimbabwe is trying to rebuild its economy by looking foreign investment and improving relations with international creditors, implementing monetary policies to stabilize inflation and attract business, negotiating debt relief to ease financial burdens. The government hopes that compensating farmers and improving governance will lead to the lifting of Western sanctions, which have hurt trade and investment. Zimbabwe is also working to strengthen diplomatic ties with global partners. Rural and social development programs are being introduced to support rural communities, including land tenure reforms to provide security for new farmers, youth employment initiatives to create opportunities in agriculture, infrastructure projects to improve roads, electricity, and water access. Despite these efforts, challenges remain, and many farmers and citizens feel that recovery is slow and uneven. Thank you for your time.